In this episode, we're going to talk insurance liabilities and road trips, predictable success, which is the opposite, unleashing the church beyond Sundays, and a mini structure for communicating information. Hello, Derek.
Oh, wow. Hi, Danielle. How's it going?
It's going great.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're in a little bit of we're doing a digital fast as a church.
We are.
When this airs, I think we'll still be doing that.
Yep.
How's it going for you?
It's good. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
Man, the thing that I've noticed is like there is and I'm not a ton on social media, but we do watch TV a lot in the evenings, and it's like kind of a constant thrum in the background of our lives.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing that has the brain fog, I feel like there's a brain fog that comes with digital stuff, and it feels like it's lifted. I just feel like I'm more present in the room, like I'm thinking clearer. There's like Kim and I are having better conversations in the evening, like all that little, all that stuff. That feels really good. I miss the sports updates.
Oh, of course.
I'm like
sure
off of all that. Like I'm not getting the football news of all the trade. Like people are texting me or telling me, which is fine. But the March Madness thing, I'm gonna have to figure out at some point. Like I probably do want to watch a couple of the games, and I'll just be. The idea is just to build a little bit more discipline around it. It's not like a total, Yeah,
it's not. Yeah.
The idea is to
evaluate.
and keep the good
conscious.
and get rid of the bad.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what about you? How's it going for you?
Good. One interesting turn of events. I actually didn't plan this at the beginning. So I'm doing stuff separately, but as a family, we're doing no devices from 6 to 8.
Oh,
And it's been fine. Dax hurt his ankle the other day, so we let him be on it a little bit just because he was sitting there with ice and he was crying and he was freaking out. So we broke it a little bit for that. But again, that's just like, okay, it's whatever.
Right.
But so the other day, Dax loves music. And so the other day we came upon we saw this movie Flow, and it's this animated movie with no words. It's just
wow.
It's just music and these animals like in a huge flood. And it's this whole allegory about how humans deal with conflict. It's really a beautiful movie.
Whoa.
Adults should watch it. It's really good. So he really latched on to it.
it.
Yeah, it's called Flow. It won It won the Oscar this year.
Wow.
So I don't know. But so it's really good. But anyway, it has a beautiful soundtrack, obviously, because there's no words. So we've been listening to that. And I think I'll give it to God. It popped into my head. I was like, I need to start doing like values with him. So on the way to school now, what we've been doing is like the most recent one today we did is like, hey, Dax, did I ever tell you that Heartlands are leaders? And he's like, what? And so, so it's just cool. It's just little, it's not
awesome.
So I'm trying I'm going to try to do that I don't want to overload them, but like every week, just kind of talk about something or whatever.
What a great.
It was a God thing. It was not a Danielle thing at all. It was like definitely a God thing, but he's like, Heartlands are leaders. He's like, what does, what does leader mean? What does, it's kind of cool. The difference between being in charge and being a leader and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And,
I love it. That's awesome.
So that was a really special extra thing.
I'm glad you're dipping into that.
Yeah. I don't think I would have if it's the clarity of mind thing. It's just, and I'm not like some zombie, but like you're just kind of going from one thing to the next sometimes, and just
and just how you fill your time.
Yeah,
you fill that spare time with fixating on something.
Or we would have been singing along to a song instead of just listening to
I got this great gift the other day from one of our mutual friends who said, "It's Lent and you got us hooked on Silo," which is one of my favorite shows on Apple
that's
TV.
Funny.
And it's a good thing our church started the year with a month of digital fasting. It's this funny gift.
That's awesome. Whoops.
Well,
that's funny.
You win some, you lose some.
You do, but it's good. I think it's cool. It's going to be cool to see. It'll be a nice study in how to lead a church through something not from the pulpit.
Right. Yeah, that was one of my,
and we didn't expect to talk about this today. We're just talking about it.
No,
but
that's true.
It'll be cool to see at the end of it, like, how did it go? How many people did it?
Yeah, because I mean, when we do big church-wide campaigns, if you will, of any kind, I think back to like 40 Days of Purpose and all this stuff. And boy, we should bring that back.
We have our next megachurch memories.
But even any kind of big initiative like that, or fundraising campaign, or anything that's like, we're always leading those from the pulpit. And it's actually kind of funny. We were in a planning meeting, and I was talking about how I didn't think this would work without any pulpit time, and you're like on the side. you might be thinking too much in the past of how we used to do things.
Multiplication mindset.
Multiplication mindset. So, like, okay, let's try it.
We'll
so
see.
yeah, so it's been really good. I think the people from the church that I've heard from that are doing it, it's been like a really positive experience. And one person came up to me at Ash Wednesday, which is kind of when we formally kicked it off, and said that since Facebook's inception, they have never gone a day without being on Facebook. And they're like, and I'm doing this fast.
My gosh.
They're like, and it's just,
wow.
And everybody has the same, and just said, this is going to be a challenge for me. And obviously, there's really good uses for these things.
Of
so they're
course.
like, this is how I stay
demonizing-
connected with my family. And that's all really good stuff.
Yeah.
But just, I think 40 days isn't going to kill anybody.
No,
and so like
we'll be okay.
to try it and do it is really cool.
Yeah,
So
it's good.
It's been good.
Good. All right, let's move on. Megachurch memories. This is where we focus on what was, what should or shouldn't have been, and what has endured what we've learned. So today, you wanted to talk about the church van.
The church van.
Yeah.
The dreaded church van.
I almost
And
died.
listen, as I was thinking about the church van, like we'll share some memories
Yeah,
about the
of
church
course.
van. But like,
Also, a moment of silence for everyone else. Just think for a second. When you hear church van, does your mind just go as insane as mine does?
But listen, that was part of what I wanted to say, because our experience might have been different than some. Like,
I hope so, because, man.
I think so. Because
Yeah.
a lot of churches use their church vans for very noble purposes.
Oh, no, that was not us. Just kidding.
I mean, I think about
picking kids up
like certainly
Yeah.
like there's churches that I know of that
Even
were like
still.
the person that drives the church van is like the hero of the church, because
Yes.
they're going to bring everybody to church. The people that can't get there and
Taking the
can't-
meals to the shut-ins.
taking the meals, and
absolutely.
that was not necessarily.
That was not our journey. It was not our journey.
What was our journey, Danielle?
Well, first of all, I met our church van, and someone introduced, I forget, or we came up with a name where we started calling it Lazarus.
Right.
Because we just could never get approval to get a new church van.
Yeah, no, and it was
So they
never
kept-
very.
They just kept fixing it.
Right. So
kept
it
coming
died.
back to life.
It died and came
Died
back
on
to life.
trips.
It died and came back to life.
Oh, my goodness. Lazarus, big blue, 15-passenger van.
Baby Beluga.
Baby Beluga, we would call it.
Yeah, there were some names for
Baby
it.
Beluga.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you like out the spout at the top.
Yep. Oh man. So yeah.
Do you have any memories that stand out?
Yeah, I have a couple. One, we were going to a Stephen Curtis Chapman concert in Cleveland, Signs of Life, if I remember correctly. Yes, it was that album.
Deep. Okay.
And you,
Me.
again, this is the statute of limitations on liability issues,
Is it?
but you were doing donuts or something. Not donuts, but you were like doing what did you
Danielle.
call them? Anyway, someone would drive our van sometimes and just drive in circles quickly around abandoned parking lots for fun. Well, one of the problems with Lazarus is his door latches stopped working well. So you had to lock. You know how 15-passenger vans, like the two doors on the side open up, and that's how
Right.
you climb in.
Right.
Well,
This is before the sliding.
Yeah, no sliding. These are
the
gate doors.
bifold. Or not,
yeah.
not.
Like a gate. Like it opens.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
two-door open. It used to be you could just close it, but then it got to the point where we had to close it and lock it,
And
so
lock
the
it.
little things went up and held the door.
So it
But
actually
did we
latched.
still drive children in it? Yes, we did. But anyway, we were doing those. I fell off my seat. The doors opened up, and this other kid like grabbed my shirt and pulled me back into the van. Like at least my head was out. And did you stop? No, you did. I think you did stop, but like then we just kept on doing it. But I remember that.
All right. Yeah.
And I remember the other one I remember is trying to take that thing across the border to Canada.
Oh.
But the thing I remember, the van was fine. The thing I remember is it brought back a memory of there were a couple kids that we were like, oh no, this kid's going to say something at the border and we're
Correct.
going to get arrested. It's going to happen. So we were screaming not in a mean way. We were like making a joke about it, but like we were screaming at this kid. We're like, do not talk, do not make eye contact with anybody, do not move, like whatever. And it was fine. But like I was so scared
Right.
we were not going to make it across the border. And just so many memories of kids being crazy. I loved it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about all the places that van went. I mean, it was a
it went
well-traveled
everywhere.
van.
Yeah.
Probably the most traveled was to Chicago and back
yeah.
because we would go out to
Why?
Mecca. Well, Mecca.
I know, but
Willow Creek.
Like, why did we take that van?
Danielle.
It was so unsafe. Anyway.
So out to Willow Creek and back. And the one time we were coming back from a conference.
Wait, you got to tell the context of the culture you created in the van.
So we're very competitive, right?
Oh,
and so you would always try to be the first person into a new state. Okay, so anytime we crossed the state line, talk about dangerous. People would rush up from the four corners of the van.
Yeah, it was appropriate.
Stick their hand up the windshield as far as they could get it to be the first one in to a new state. And so we were coming back. So the trip to Erie, Pennsylvania from Chicago goes Chicago, Illinois, down through the top of Indiana, across the top of Ohio into Pennsylvania to our home. And so we were coming across Indiana and
someone was sitting on a cooler between the front two seats, not even in a seat.
This is before seatbelt laws.
Before
probably.
Seatbelts. No, it isn't.
No, it isn't. So anyway, we're sitting there, and I see the state sign coming up, and I'm trying to kind of keep it to myself.
Yeah,
because
we would always try to
be like all coy about it.
2 a.m. or something?
Probably. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, a few people rush up to stick the first arm into the new state, and I remember saying out loud, "Welcome to Michigan."
Everyone's going, oh, hi, or what state were we saying?
It was in Indiana. We were supposed to be going.
Indiana, and he's
welcome to Michigan.
And everyone screams, Michigan.
So yeah, we took a wrong turn somewhere.
You had to pull over because you were laughing so hard.
Oh my gosh!
And we didn't know where we were.
Yeah, we didn't know where we were. We had to get back on.
It was before MapQuest, if you will.
It was AAA. We had AAA triptychs.
We had printed out MapQuest and an atlas, I think, is what we had. Yeah, but it was before smartphone, before you bring it up on a smartphone.
Anyway, church van. Hey, are there any lasting benefits from the church van experiences other than we're all alive? Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, that's it.
Nobody died.
I think for real though, and I've even thought about it for recent trips that I want to do. Or upcoming trips, recent trips I want to do, upcoming trips I want to do. There's a team building component of being in a car or van, or it doesn't have to be a van, but
you bet.
With people. I think that's
some
lasting.
of that bonding. I mean, you think about we're rattling off memories here.
Oh yeah.
And there's 50 more.
Yeah. I'm thinking of people. I'm like, oh man.
Oh yeah.
Like people I haven't thought of in years. That
you went on trips with. And that were part of those. So yeah, there's definitely a bonding element of driving together places.
Do you remember Joe Vogel ripped me out of the front seat?
Oh my gosh.
Should we say Joe Vogel? Hi, Joe. Not that you're listening, but do you remember he ripped me out of the front seat? It came out of nowhere.
I don't remember that.
And we had bruises. Oh yeah. It was awesome.
It's something.
He was awesome.
My favorite my predecessor, Al Detter, my favorite Al Detter quote was, anytime it's time to leave for a trip, he'd say, "Come on, everybody, it's time to mount the van."
Yep. Next segment. That is exactly what he would say. Oh, and remember you would have really intense, sorry guys.
Oh, wow.
But really intense goodbyes with the van.
Oh, send-offs.
We would do send-offs.
Oh, big send-offs.
And you wrestled somebody to the ground.
Annie and I went rolling down the hill together while her husband watched from the van.
From the van.
Just I was trying to give her a hug,
and
we lost
you can't
our
get
balance.
Out. Once you're in the van, you're not getting out, depending on what seat you're in.
Yeah,
gosh, I loved that thing. Okay, anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you for enduring our megachurch memories. Okay.
This is just
it's too long.
Cleansing.
Right. Yeah.
Cleansing for us.
Sponsored by Ford. All right.
Have you driven the Lord? Okay. We're tying it all together. We've lost Danielle.
Summarize all the 90s. Okay, hang on. It's fine. This is us. All right. All right. Training notes. This is a chapter. We are serious professionals. Okay. We want to dedicate this chapter to just overflow from things we've learned in internal staff trainings. And so you have a really cool one. You shared with our vision team this week a learning that you recently had from going to a GLN gathering, right? Gathering. Pastors gathering for the summit. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So, and I won't bore you with the whole training, but I think So there's this thing that pastors have. Some are aware of it, some are not. Of like when you go away to a conference or to a pastor's gathering, that everyone back at the church is trembling for when you get home because of all the new ideas.
They are
the new ideas that you're going to learn. And so there's always this for me anyway. There's always this tension of like, I don't want to be that guy, but there are things that you pick up that are like. And this one in particular was not like a new direction thing at all. Right. For me, it was, we were sitting in a training. It was a book that I read years ago, but for whatever reason, the timing of the content was like fireworks going off in my head of like all of these things that we talk, and we've even talked about on this podcast about, our struggle with organizational discipline and some of our the bugaboos of our organization. And so Les McEwen's talk on predictable success, he just did, it was an hour, he kind of walked through the model, and it's about organizational life cycles essentially, so you start with early struggle, and then you move into this fun, and then there's whitewater, and then if you do it right, you get to predictable success, where the stuff that's working, you figure out ways to scale that and to keep it working. And when that gets too system dependent, then you move into the kind of the back half of the life cycle, which is treadmill. And then if you start losing vision in operation, then you start really operating more just on keeping the systems going. You start to hit ruts, and then he calls the last stage death rattle, when an organization starts to die. Yeah. And anyway, so the thing that was so super clarifying for me is I feel like one of our struggles as an organization and the reason I don't think we've ever fully gotten into predictable success. We've had great success over the years.
For sure.
But is because of this one particular skill set that he calls the processor. So he says there's the visionary who holds the vision, there's the operator who is kind of the finisher, and really the fun season for organizations are generally when the visionary is casting vision and the operators are operating the vision. And there's a lot of good stuff happening, and you're saying yes to everything because we're going and we're moving and we're up and to the right and everything's going well. And he said really for that to continue for an organization, you have to get to the place where you can scale that. Yeah. And in order to do that, you need a processor in the mix. And this is somebody who will help you with systems and processes and structures in place so that you can scale and keep repeating all the great stuff that you're good at.
Yeah, that's the context for me that clicked.
Yes.
That second part of what you just said.
Right.
So that.
Right.
For sure.
So that and then we just get to the point where it's like, yes, we say these same words in every check-in, or we check on these same values in every meeting. And the reason we do that is because this is the play that God's called us to run, and it's working, and we're going to keep running it until it doesn't work anymore. And the problem is oftentimes those processors to the visionaries and the operators are annoying because they're holding you to things and they're putting systems in place and go, no, you can't do that new idea. Come back and run the play because these are the plays we decided that work, and we're going to keep running the plays and running the plays and running the plays over and over again. And just the light bulbs that went off in my mind in terms of kind of why we are where we are, some of the struggles I think that we have had historically, and I think it's good at going forward as we're trying to scale this new thing to go, we really need some operators in the mix, and have that kind of brain power leveraged at the right moment in our organization so that we can really figure out the stuff that we're doing that we want to repeat and have some people that are really good at helping us to repeat those things again and again. So,
you know what else I realized overnight is so any attempt that we've made at this processes thing, I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's ever been vision around the process. Like it's always been, the most I could give it would be, we had one idea where it was just for like efficiency. Like let's not make people repeat the same mistakes that people made before. So let's have a list. I've heard that kind of narrative. I've also heard the narrative, let's set ourselves up so that, and we're really passionate about this, but let's set ourselves up so if another church needs help, we can hand them, hey, this is what we do. Not that you have to do it, but here's what we've learned, you know, great, noble things. But when you're on a Tuesday trying to set up a baptistry for a baptism experience, you're not thinking about those two things. You need to be thinking about like, why am I doing this? What's the vision behind what I'm doing? And I think that just being able to scale and be able to, it's almost like these kinds of things will set people up for freedom, for innovation.
Totally.
And I don't think we've ever talked about it like that before, because we didn't really put that framework together, I don't think.
Yeah.
Or the right people weren't in the right rooms to that point. Weren't in the right rooms together to be able to synthesize the vision with the process.
Right.
So I'm excited even just for us to have that in the back of our mind moving forward. I think it's good.
I think there are places that we have examples of this. There are places that we do this.
Yes, of course.
It's like one of the ones that you and I are both involved in is like our sermon process, I would say, is in this predictable success
absolutely.
mode.
Yep.
Just because we've got all the systems in place, we just keep running the plays. And there's innovation within it.
Yes. Yeah, once there's stability, for sure.
But it's almost like that process had to be there before we could really get creative with it. And I just don't think we've ever taken the leap to do this organizationally.
Right.
We there's moments of it.
Yes.
There's little examples of it within our organization, but to go overall,
this is what we do.
This is what we do.
Yeah.
And here are the things that we're going to keep doing over and over again. And I think that, I think specifically in terms of just overall vision ministries, our core ministries, and in our staffing culture.
Yeah,
it's that's one of those places where it's like, it'll be good for us to have some plays that we just keep running with our staff because we know that these things work.
Right.
And we're just going to keep anyway. And again, like you said, it's not to eliminate innovation.
Right.
It's to allow for the right kinds of innovation. So anyway, I think one of the other things I would just say is that, so this was a learning that I learned offsite. It came together. I didn't bring every learning that I had offsite back, but this was one that I thought was particularly helpful to where we are at this moment. I think just presenting it for 5 or 10 minutes in Vision Team helped everybody's minds to kind of get around this concept. And now I think we have a new framework that we're able to think about the future and like what's the next best thing for us in a way that I hope didn't train wreck too many things. I think it brought clarity and not confusion.
I think so too, and especially we've talked about this on here, one of our foreground horizons for our vision is this idea of calibration and efficiency and all that kind of stuff. And I think this will feed into that perfectly. It's like perfect timing.
Yeah.
It's really good.
That's good.
Okay, cool.
Great.
All right. So as we tweak our assimilation model to have more of a disciple-making focus and invent a multiplication funnel to awake the lake and reach our region, we're learning as we go. Each week we want to have a topic to discuss in front of you and with you and a practical moment of learning. And so this week we're welcoming Dan White for a conversation. Dan White Jr. has been a pastor for 25 years in rural, suburban, and urban churches. He's a coach and consultant with the V3 movement, and he has, you guys will talk about this, but he co-founded the Kineo Center. And he has written 3 books.
Yep.
His most recent one is Love Over Fear. So look him up, Dan White, if you want a good read.
He also has a really pertinent book to kind of the stuff that we're talking about on this podcast called The Church as Movement.
Oh, good.
It's really good. So we'll link all that in the show notes, but this was a fun discussion.
Cool.
Can't wait for you to hear it.
All right, so I'm here with my friend Dan White, old friend. It's not a comment on your age, but a comment on how long we've known each other. Yeah, we got to serve together up here in the Northeast for at least a few years, where we intersected. You were up in Syracuse, and I was here in Erie, and man, now you are in sunny, beautiful Puerto Rico, and I am not. So, hey, just by way of
you.
I know
you can
dude.
come. You can come.
I know.
Yeah.
But by way of introduction, why don't you just kind of tell us some of the cool things that are going on in your world these days? Just give us a little snapshot as to some of the stuff you're working on. And this podcast is mostly for church leaders and pastors, and we're thinking about kind of this discipleship context that we're in and helping people to live that out in their real life. So you've been a practitioner of this a long time, but talk about your focus right now these days in Puerto Rico, just by way of introduction, and then we'll get into some of the stuff.
Yeah. I think I have two focuses. One is a bit older and is still something I'm wildly passionate about. And then I have a kind of a new
Okay.
calling that's really just only about 5 years old. So it's new to me, even though it's 5 years old. But right now I'm in Puerto Rico. In my wife and I, with a team of people, launched a healing development center right overlooking the Caribbean. And we walk leaders, nonprofit leaders, social good leaders, ministry leaders, people from rural, urban, suburban churches through a 1 week experience facing their own wounds, their own weariness, and it's a bit of a kind of a blitz experience of trying
Mm.
to unpack and process why you're exhausted, why you're hurting, why you're irritable, why you're struggling, and move you to a place of at least mapping what healing and renewal looks like for you. So that's what we do on a weekly basis. And we've just, it's not all about stats, but just in the last 4 years, we've had a little over 500 leaders come through, 14 different denominations, men, women. The What's been evident in the work is that pain is the common denominator. It doesn't really matter your
Mm.
theological perspective or background. When you're in pain, you just want to know how to get through it. And so we've created a safe space, but it's not just a spiritual direction center. You are literally walking through a development and discipleship process towards some level of resurrection and renewal. And so we get a lot of leaders that are currently in ministry or leading a nonprofit. We're not really a transition ministry, although we'll get an occasional person, but most people are actively serving, and maybe privately, or maybe it's starting to show that they're running on fumes, or they're
Mm.
struggling with a betrayal, or they're struggling with loss, they're struggling with some failure, and they don't want to quit yet, but they don't know what to do to continue on. And so that's primarily who we work with, and it's been fun to meet people from all over the world. It's some of their most rawest moments, and see God do really
Yeah.
surprising things. So
Yeah. That,
that's the new passion. The old passion, which is
yeah.
still something I really, really care about, and I still do on a daily basis, is helping churches,
Mm.
mostly church plants, some established churches, make a turn towards a more discipleship oriented, movemental approach to being the church. And so I've been working on that project for about 15 years, and I think it's going to
Mm.
be a lifelong calling. But those two things kind of converge, the first one and the second one, really because I just care about the church and the people of
Yeah.
God. And so, yeah,
I
those
love it.
are the things I'm doing right now.
I love it. So, and obviously, some people listening to this might be interested in one or both of those passions of
Mm,
yours. So, we'll make sure to link all your information in the show notes where people find this, so that they can get to your work
thanks.
and what you're up to. And by the way, your space down there in Puerto Rico is spectacularly beautiful.
Yeah,
And so, if people, you kind of skipped over that part, but man, the
sure.
place itself is lovely. So, if people are
Yeah.
looking for a way
It's
to
hard.
refresh.
It's hard to take credit for God's beauty because
Yeah,
50% of it is just
yeah.
where we're situated. But yeah, so the locals call it a Garden of Eden because it's
Wow.
just a curated space in the middle of the rainforest. And they're kind of unusual that someone has, it was like this before we came. The previous
Mm.
owners just cultivated this place. And
Wow.
it was a restaurant for
Wow.
60 years. And so the work was turning it into a more of a renewal discipleship center, but it had the bones of a beautiful place to dwell. So yeah,
Mm.
so cool to see it every day and watch people
Yeah.
actually when they come just be surprised. This is partly my wife's passion,
Mm.
is that like most ministry leaders just don't get that kind of attentiveness and hospitality
Hospitality.
and
Yeah.
a level of like, you are valuable. You are not just a utility to us. You are deeply, deeply loved and valued. And so the place kind of screams that from every corner. So
It's great.
that's a lot of our
So,
work.
so I know some of your story, and you probably have to do the 3-minute version of this, but can you just talk about why kind of this pastoral health and health, emotional and spiritual health for ministry leaders is such a passion of yours?
Yeah. Well, it comes out of my own story. 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with, well, it showed up. I had a tremor that started to show up in my hands that wouldn't go away, and went through all the diagnostics. And ultimately, what we discovered was that I was having it's CPTSD was what was starting to show up in my body, which is this cumulative effect of pain and trauma and stress, and my body was not turning off. So even if I went on vacation, my hands were shaking. It didn't matter, I was just always, my nervous system was just not relaxing. And that started a journey of me seeking my own, like, what the world is going on. I thought I was fine. I think I'm resilient. I think I have a strong will. Why is my body? And then even behind the scenes, I had 2 panic attacks during our church plan over that 10-year period that were wildly surprising. One was before I was preaching one Sunday. One was after a meeting, and I've never been a high stress person. And so those 2 things felt like a blip on the radar to me. And like, they were kind of an anomaly. And so everything started to accumulate with that diagnosis of CPTSD. And that sent my wife and I on a search of like, well, how do I recover? How do I heal? What's going on? What's under the surface? And honestly, Derek, we just had a hard time finding any place that would walk us through this, that wouldn't cost, what a Betty Ford clinic is, like that wouldn't cost us 15 to 20 grand. And we, as poor church planners, like that was just so out of our league. And so the seed of the idea was actually birthed out of our own pain, and like needing something economical, accessible. And I didn't just want to do therapeutic work. I wanted discipleship work. I wanted someone to work through my spiritual life, emotional life, relational life, and then move towards some real practice. Like what do I take away from this? How do I live into this? And so we just couldn't find it. And we went on a 18-month journey of trying to explore how to do that ourselves. We pieced some things together, and out of that came, after that 2-year season came, I think, the beginning of a calling, which was, this should not be so hard to find. This should not be so hard to find help. And as I was sharing my own journey, I kept meeting leaders who were in the same place privately and quietly, and they couldn't find help. Even if they were in, here's the thing, even if they were in therapy or had a counselor, there was a level of exhaustion and woundedness that most counselors just could not understand, especially being in the seat of a pastor, the dynamics, the complexities, the multiple expectations. And so we knew that after that 2 years that we had to at least participate in birthing something and creating, and this kind of converged with my constant calling of development and discipleship is always there. And what God had done is kind of taken my own pain and said, you're going to move this into the inner life and to the quiet epidemic of ministry leaders not knowing what to do with their own weariness and woundedness. So yeah, it came out of my own story.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I am aware of some of that, and had friends with you up here through some of that, and it's just amazing to see how God has, it's kind of that beauty from ashes,
absolutely,
instinct that God has of saying, this was a very difficult thing, but I'm going to use it to help, to help so many others. And
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I love that.
that's the gospel, right? It's
Yeah,
not
that's right.
it's not just newness, it's newness out of some death. It's
Yeah.
resurrection out of. And so
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite painful to walk through, but it's beautiful, when it's starting to happen and you see that you're turning the corner and being
Hmm.
able to enjoy again and live again and have
Hmm.
vision for the future again. So
Yeah, I love you, man. I'm so thrilled to see that aliveness in you, and you're helping others and a healthy place. And that's just awesome to see. So,
thanks,
hey,
Derek. Yeah.
listen, so I want to talk about, you know a little bit about this journey that we're on as a church, and talking
Yeah.
about some of the changes that we're making. And so a little bit of this is just selfish, that I wanted to talk to you, and we'll just bounce some ideas off each other in front of a bunch of people, if that's okay with
Sure.
you. Some of the stuff that we're
Absolutely.
wrestling through and dealing with. And so, I think as we're moving to more toward this kind of multiplication model, and we're looking more toward how do we resource people, disciples outside the walls of the church, living out their calling in their, live, work, learn, and play kind of arenas of their
Yes.
life. Um, some of it has been it has been so deeply ingrained in me and us to do it a different way, that we've had to use
Yeah.
thought experiments to try to break some of those things. And so
Yes.
one of the thought experiments that's been helpful is to say, what if we thought about every person in our church like we think about a campus pastor or a site pastor? We're a multi-site church, right? So to go in the same ways we would want to train and resource and equip our site pastors to lead, it's like that they're the pastor of their parish. Well, all of our
Right.
people are the pastors of a parish.
Yes.
How would it change the way we operated as a church to think of it in that way? Now, I want to come back to some specifics about that, but I want to start theologically and just say,
Okay.
one of the tipping points has been just the ecclesiology of that.
Right.
Like kind of like what counts as a church. What could we call a church? What are we allowed to describe as a church? And I've said before, a couple guys meeting in a coffee shop isn't necessarily a church.
Right.
And so, I guess, thinking about how do you define church? How do you think about that?
Yeah.
And go into like why you think, I know you're tracking with all that. Why do you think it's important for us to move beyond a Sunday only model and think about the church outside the walls? And kind of what ecclesiology do you have that kind of allows for that, I guess, is what I would.
That's great. Yeah. So that I don't, maybe behind that, Derek, and not you as a person, but often the prototype of people that are like, well, what is church? Is that moving outside the walls of the church, that most people attempting to do that are thrusting off connection, authority, being tethered to there's a rebellion. And so that now there might have been I do meet some leaders like that, but I think that's a bit of a misnomer, actually, is that that people that are experimenting with church outside of the walls or outside of traditional structures are doing that primarily because they don't like the church. I find a lot of people that are actually doing that because there's a recovery, there's like a real longing, a telos of kingdom come, that maybe the traditional churches created constraints on them, and so they want to practice that. And so so that's what I found to be true, because I've been doing this for 15 years, and 1 out of 10 people are just seeking to throw off all accountability and constraints.
Shackles of the church.
Yeah. But ultimately, your ecclesiology, what is the church? My understanding of the New Testament is that the church, you have the church anywhere you have 3 things happening. And I don't mean compartmentalized in different places, but actually happening together. with a group of people, and that is communion with God, commission into the world, and community with each other. So I use those three C's a lot because that's what Jesus did with his disciples. He drew them into communion with the Father and the Son and the Spirit, dwelling with God, teaching them how to be with God. He modeled that himself. Then he took them on mission, and right away he took his disciples to feed the poor and care for the sick. He didn't just teach them, he showed them. And then he pushed them into community. He taught them how to dwell with one another, love one another, deal with conflict, deal with their egos. I've done a lot of work on how politically polarized they were and how it was amazing that they were actually in the same group. So when someone is going to plant a church outside the walls, they have to have a plan, not just idealism, but of how you're going to do those three C's. Because some people love one of the C's over the other. Some people are like, it's all about community, and they just really want to belong, but they do not want to be sent. And some people love mission and justice and working on behalf of God and the world, but they do not like being tethered to community, or they don't have a relationship with the Father, Son, and Spirit, and community, and so communion. So you really have to structure the church around those three things. I don't think that's just church outside the walls, but I think that ultimately, if you reduce down any church, those are the three things that should be functioning.
Yeah.
So any training that I do is getting men and women to get very practical about how they are living in those spaces, training for those three spaces, and drawing everybody into all three spaces, not being able to self-select out and say, I only like the community piece, or I only like the commission piece. So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, that's great.
It's really just observing Jesus.
Yeah. I think those categories are super helpful. And I think, again, we're thinking about even non-traditional expressions of that. So it's not even necessarily a traditional church planter or something like that, but like a business leader. Like we got a business leader in our church. He's like, I've got 50 employees. I'm their pastor. I want to disciple them. I want to care for their families. I want to and so we're going, what does it look like for us to treat that guy like a site pastor? And I think that those categories are very helpful, Dan, because I think even in a business space, you could think about those things about, am I creating those different environments for those three things to happen, which I think is clarifying.
Yeah. And Derek, people enter into the life of the church often through one of those pathways. And that's, some people, especially in my own church plant, we were going at it for about 12 years. We would do a lot of work. We worked with refugees. We did a lot of work on the street. And we had people that would participate in the life of our church just through that one commission piece. And that's all they felt. That's all they felt ready for. And there was alignment there, but there wasn't alignment yet with communion with the Father, Son, and Spirit, and community, dwelling and shared life with other people. But we gave people space to journey at their own pace. But those three were kind of like entry points. Ultimately, we want you to live in all three because we think that's how Jesus trained people. But that's
love it.
Kind of the reducible minimum, if you can think about it that way, of what a church is.
Yeah, so this is related, and it may be too related, but one of the things we're really wrestling with is measuring things. What do we measure? So traditionally as a church, we measure, have attendance and offerings and buildings,
right?
And those don't apply as neatly in a missional model,
right?
And so when we're trying to measure fruitfulness and growth in a different way, not necessarily numeric growth, but spiritual growth. And so thinking about that, do you have any just thoughts in general on measuring things? Like, first of all, should we be measuring anything? Second of all, like, if so, how do we measure differently in kind of a missional space?
That's good. Yeah, the measuring is important. I think that's also another misnomer, is that any
Yeah.
kind of missional, movemental expressions of the church are anti, quantifying or
Hmm.
qualifying or measuring things. There are some that are, but I don't think that's the norm for most. The question is, like, how do you measure this thing?
Hmm.
I like to use I like to use the metaphor of the Fitbit versus the scale. So,
Hmm.
I've always struggled with my weight. It's been a
Hmm.
lifelong struggle. And I've done some like crash diets and lost lots of pounds at certain points. And I get on the scale and I look down at the scale and I go, oh, I'm getting healthy because the number's gone down, right? And that's one way to measure health, by just looking at numbers. And that's probably the most simplistic and understandable way. Like, I mean, I do that because I just want some return. Am I doing okay? Did I move from 225 down to 215? So I
Hmm.
don't know if you relate with that, but
Hmm. I'm
there,
tracking with you.
yeah, measuring has to move towards Fitbit. So
Hmm.
Fitbit is starting to measure the things that really matter, true health. So using that same concept is your blood work, your body fat, your heart rate, your respiratory, your oxygen saturation. Things I'm starting to do now that I'm getting older, I realize, gosh, things on the inside need to be looked at, not just whether I look skinny or not. And so Fitbit starts to measure true health. And so when you're moving into a more missional movement, whatever we want to call it, missional expression, you actually have to measure the right things. And so there's four things that we put on the Fitbit whenever we're helping a church transition or helping a church plant start to measure the right things. And these are the four things. I'll just throw them out there really quick.
Love it,
Is
please.
boundary crossing mission. I'll shoot through them real quick. Boundary crossing mission,
Hmm.
life forming discipleship, tight knit community, and neighborhood presence. So we create a questionnaire and evaluation around each of those four things. And every 6 months, we have people. They're short. We ask people, "What's your boundary crossing mission?" If they say, "I don't really have one. I'm too busy because I'm working 60 hours a week." Um, or someone says, my boundary crossing mission is that I am purposely going to the YMCA and meeting with a mom's group there of young kids. That's my mission. Um, so we ask people questions around, this is Fitbit. How are you doing on boundary crossing mission? Life forming discipleship. The question, churches kind of change the questions based on their context, but those four categories are really important. Life forming discipleship is, what does discipleship look like for you? If you tell me it's because I'm watching YouTube clips of Derek's sermons and I'm reading a book, I'd say you're not in life forming discipleship. You are learning, but you're not being formed. This is the difference between how Jesus did discipleship and how we think discipleship often happens now. So, what is life forming? I'm in a mentoring relationship, or I'm in this training group trying to serve the poor on Saturday mornings. Where is this life forming discipleship happening for you? And how many people in my congregation are in a life forming discipleship space? Now, this gets a little tricky because and this can get a little bit controversial around the value of small groups. And so I think small groups can be life-forming discipleship spaces, but for the most part, they haven't been.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of research around. I mean, I was passionate about small groups when I was leading at a large church, but they haven't made the transition. Some have, but for the most part, into a discipling space. And that doesn't mean having the latest, John Ortberg Bible study and talking about it. It means actually being discipled for being a missionary in the world with a group of people. So you have to ask life-forming discipleship questions. Tight-knit community. This is how often are you are you sitting around the table and sharing food with people that are in your community? I don't mean in the neighborhood, in your community. There was a report that came out, it's like 4 years old now, that was, I think North Point did the research, and they were trying to evaluate their small groups and how their small groups are doing. And they found that only 4% of the people in their small groups had a meal with somebody in their small group one time that whole year, outside of the structured small group meeting. And that was a shocking revelation. Like our people aren't moving past the program into some level of like sharedness with other people. And I think that's what we have to start evaluating, is like how much of our lives are starting to overlap outside of just the program that we attend, that we feel obligated to. That doesn't mean it can't happen in small group. I think it can. I actually think there's a place for missional small groups, but we do have to evaluate for tight-knit community. And then the last one is neighborhood presence. And how present are you in your neighborhood? Most people, when they think of their neighborhood, they think of it as a place they live. They don't see it as a place of ultimately connection. Do you know your neighbors? There's some great books out there about The Art of Neighboring is a wonderful book. I've got a tool that I help people through. But how many neighbors do you know? Do you know their names? When's the last time that you saw them? Have you brought them a meal? Have you hosted a neighborhood party? Have you attended a neighborhood party? Just being present to the physical geography around you. So those 4 things we kind of put on the Fitbit, and every 6 months to 8 months, we kind of do a check-in for people that are participating in this way of being the church. And it kind of goes up, it goes up and down. Sometimes we realize, oh, we're a little unhealthy, or wow, we're getting a spike in health. And that's where we start evaluating, like, okay, we need to put more energy in helping people with boundary crossing mission. They don't know where to go, or they don't know how to maintain that, or they're burnt out, or they're tired, or they're overworked, or, they just had a child, and so they're putting that part on pause. I don't know if this helps, just that Fitbit.
Oh, super helpful, Dan. Jeez.
Scale.
So I'm just letting you go, man. I just want you to talk. It's really,
Okay,
really,
sorry.
really, really great. No, it's really great. It's super helpful. So, you've given us a lot of great kind of practical stuff there. I know that in terms of just people living on mission in their, neighborhoods, workplaces, schools, that sort of stuff. I know I've become kind of a tool freak. My staff teases me, and oh, you need a tool, talk to Derek, and so but you were, I think, ahead of your time, or ahead of the curve, at least ahead of me on this part, when it comes to just like using tools as handles to help people live stuff out, live out ideas. And this is kind of part of the transition from teaching or lecturing to training people, which is something that we're becoming more passionate about anyway. I'm wondering, I remember a time that we were together, you were doing a training and you pulled out the Johari window, and you were talking about using it with your elders. Again, this is back in the day. At the time, do you have a favorite tool that you're using recently or lately, or a couple of tools that you think would be helpful for pastors or even just people living out their discipleship journey or leadership journey that either you've created or that you've used, or something that pops out?
That's a hard question, because as a tool fanatic, he's got lots of tools in the toolbox. Yeah. That's the beauty of tools, is like you don't always use them, but you can use them. It's like, if they're in your toolbox, you have a wrench for that right moment. We tell people, just a kind of side rail, when people are thinking about tools, you typically have some on your tool belt, you have some in your toolbox, and you have some in your tool shed. And it's okay to have a volume of tools, but to know where they are. So there's some tools I know that I'm going to be using almost every week. And those are the things that are in my church and in my organization. I want people to become really proficient with the things that are on the tool belt. There's some things I introduce that are in the tool shed that we're only going to use once a year, maybe even once every 2 years. And that's okay. There was one year that I only pulled my snowblower out once. And so it's okay that there's different uses for those tools, and helping people to know where they might belong in their life is always helpful. But one of the tools I've been using quite a bit, it seems like, especially here at Caneo, is helping a tool around helping people manage their expectations. And some of it comes out of my own struggle of thinking that we're okay, and then
Right.
finding out a year later that we're not okay because
We
you
weren't
had
okay.
expectations. We're not okay.
Right.
And finding out people had expectations that I didn't know they had. I thought I communicated the expectations, but I didn't, because I didn't know what they were. You know, this kind of dance that we're doing around what I want from you, or what I want from this place, or what I want from this project we're working on. And so I developed this. It's just a short little trite little tool, but I use it all the time, and we do it with our staff. And actually, it's inspired by Carl Jung, a psychologist, who worked through 3 ways that we engage our expectations on someone or something. And here's the 3 things. Some people engage things through idealism. Some people engage things through pessimism, and some people, very few people, actually engage things through realism. And so when we're rolling out a new program, we put on the whiteboard, what is our idealism around this thing? And we name all our idealism. In that framework, we look at that board and we realize, wow, there's some things on here that we might be attached to that we really want, but may not happen. How are we going to be if that happens? How are we going to be if Dan doesn't do every single thing we think Dan should do? This is, you've got to like unearth the idealism we have for each other. Depending upon your personality, some people are like tuned into that. That's the way that they're talking to you, is thinking, oh, you can ideally meet all my needs. You know, you just gave me a title for this new program. Ideally, I think I'm going to crush it, and you're going to reward me, and I'm going to be on stage. You know, all the things that are like happening in someone's mind. So you really got to give space for people to name their ideals. And then you have to give space for people to name their pessimism. A lot of vision casting, I'll say this, a lot of vision casting given by a lot of leadership gurus avoid that part, because they don't want to take the air out of the room, or they don't want people to feel any kind of negativity about the grandness of possibilities. They feel like it's going to take, the oxygen out of their sails. But we're finding actually with
got to keep it positive.
Keep it positive. Yeah. And what I found, and I think we're finding this more with like Gen Z and millennials, is if you don't give space for that, it is going to bite you in the butt. It is going to come back. What it ultimately turns into is resentment. Whether that's a healthy response or not, that's where it goes. If you do not give space for addressing the pessimism that we all have, some of us are just willing to say it, some of us aren't. Some of us are in denial. Some of us think that we have power to overcome all things that are difficult. But you got to give space for addressing the pessimism. Here's the dynamic. If you don't, most people are idealistic. If they're disappointed, they will drop down into pessimism. They don't know how to handle that their expectations were not met. And so they drop down to that place. So it's really important to give that space. And then realism, we name what is probably most likely going to happen if these 2 things converge. Our idealism and pessimism, somewhere in the middle is probably where we're going to exist. And that doesn't mean that God didn't come through. That doesn't mean that God's not on the move. Doesn't mean the Spirit is not stirring. We live in the already but not yet. Between kingdom come and the kingdom hasn't come fully. And so realism is actually something for us to like kind of get our hands around and name, and be comfortable with. We know if you've been married for more than 20 years, you know the realism of marriage. You're not an idealism anymore. And you're not in pessimism. You're like, I can enjoy deep, abiding love with my wife, but sometimes we fight. Sometimes we
Right.
don't get along, and sometimes our reconciliation takes a week rather than a day. And it's okay to name that realism because it still means it's good. So I've been working that tools
That's
from
great. I
about
love that.
the last couple of years. I've been struggling a lot, honestly, with like managing this expectations that are unsaid. One of mine, this is real quick. One of the things I've noticed, and I hear this a lot in leadership, is that communication can manage expectations. One of the things that Carl Jung says is that most people aren't even aware of their expectations until they're disappointed.
Wow.
So you can think you're communicating expectations, and
Wow.
most people aren't even aware they have them until the moment, Derek, you disappoint me. Now I know, oh, I had an expectation.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I thought you were going to be there for me. So anyhow,
I love
that's
that.
my attempt to kind of at least get that stuff unearthed and excavated so that it doesn't come back later as resentment or bitterness or, unnecessary conflict. So
That's amazing, dude. Hey, I love talking to you. I've got about 73 more questions that I'd ask you. We're going to have to maybe do a part 2 at some time down the road if you're
no
okay with
problem.
it. But I want to call it for today, and thank you so much for your wisdom. This is going to be so helpful. I would just can I ask you for one sage moment here from Dan White? If you were to give a piece of advice to us, knowing a little bit about where we're at in our journey, going from a kind of a big mega church that's been built on an attractional model to moving more into a movemental space, a missional space, ascending posture.
Yes. Yeah.
What any just kind of like quick words of like, Derek, here's what I would tell you as a friend as you're heading into this journey.
Yeah. I think we talked about it before we started this call, but incremental, slow is good. Think about it, the difference between a microwave and a crock pot. And it's okay that, and it's probably more saturated and more important to actually slow cook rather than microwave. I meet a lot of leaders that are like, I'm going to make this missional turn in 3 years. And I'm like, you're going to kill yourself and you're going to kill your church. Part of our struggle as leaders is actually our relationship with patience and slowness as a quality, as a good quality, not a negative quality. Some of my influence of that is actually the slow food movement. There was a great book that came out 15 years ago about slowness, and that just how does slowness become such a negative, have a negative connotation? Like you move slow, you're doing things slow, that's negative. But really the things that taste the best are the things that were slow cooked. And if you've got a smoker, you know this, right? So it's okay to train your team, get into yourself, like this is slow and that's good. It does not have, we do not have to have significant traction in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It's very incremental. That's how you know you're doing good work, if you're embracing slowness as a character trait rather than as something to avoid and supersede. So yeah, take it slow, enjoy the slowness, be incremental. Yeah.
I love it. Man, all the best to you. Thanks so much for investing some of your time into our leaders here. And again, I'll make sure everybody knows where to find you in the show notes, and your books and have been just super influential to us. So you've been a thought leader in this space for a long time. And I thank you for all the ground that you tilled, before some of the rest of us got there. So thank you, and appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for the love, Derek. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, we're back from Dan.
Yeah.
He's just like such a. I love the way that dude thinks.
Yeah.
And you saw it, like just throwing out, hey, what's a cool tool that you're using recently, and his ability to. One of my big takeaways from that conversation was when he talked about kind of the 3 levels of tools. He talked about tools that we need a tool belt, and we need a tool bench, and we need a tool shed, and so that there are some tools that you only go to once or twice a year.
Yeah.
There's some, but we want to equip people with tools that they can have in their belt.
Yeah.
And we have to distinguish for them what are those most important tools, and
That's
what
good.
do you go to every once in a while. What do you go to? So I love Dan. Hopefully you guys will check out some of his other work. He's really great.
Yeah, he's awesome. Okay, so let's move. Let's end with what happened this week. This will be me, I think. So this week, we had what we call a power hour. And this is just kind of a cool hot tip. We schedule an hour every month. I think it's the first or second Tuesday of every month on everyone's schedule. It just says power hour. If we need it for something, we use it. If we don't need it, we just give the time back to people, and it usually becomes like a prep time or something. It's usually not enough time where you can schedule something, but it's a real easy way, especially as your organization is like complex, or if you have like volunteers that are working, weird hours or whatever, you have that hour that you'll see somebody potentially once a month outside of staff meetings when you need to like catch up with something. So we'll use it for things like something as practical as like an HR thing, where people need to fill something out and sign something, to trainings, to like, hey, there's a new thing that we're doing, like whatever. It could be anything. We've done like some pilots with it, testing out discipleship tools and things like that. So for this one, we wanted to help our staff, our office staff, understand and re-understand the vision frame, which we've talked about on this podcast before. I won't go fully into it, but basically, the thing I wanted to share today was just what we learned from Clarity House, and I've tried to synthesize it to how to communicate a shift or a change in your organization, like with your team. And so I kind of gave it 3 parts. So the first part is you want to give them, you want to start with like an autobiographical moment where you ask a question or have them do something that like reaches into the recesses of their mind and helps them personalize. We learned that from Dave and Shane. But that's number 1, you're doing that. So you're letting them personally connect with what you're about to talk about. We were talking about the vision frame, so I had them look at the wall and say like, what on this wall excites you? What gives you, what do you think about when you're going to sleep at night? Like what's popping back in your brain? So then they had some discussion on that. That was the first part. Then we did a big download of the information. So inspiration, information. Dave and Shane say, what do they say? They say reflect and receive. So reflect is that first part where they're taking their own thing on. Then receive is you're getting the information or the teaching or whatever it is. And the thing that I added for our purposes is review or synthesize. So reflect, receive, review. And then synthesize is just you're bringing everything back together in some sort of tangible either tool or visual or statement, something that helps people remember the training. Because really, when we're talking, especially with staff stuff, there's so much stuff that comes through. Just in my example, is this an HR thing that's going to affect my pay? Is this a vision thing that's going to, there's a lot of categories.
Right.
And so I think part of what we have to do as leaders is help people synthesize the information they're getting and be able to then draw back on their memory to like why that was important, why I need it going forward. So for me, this is nothing earth shattering. It's just something that we tried to put into practice. And I think worked pretty well. I think we can still probably work on like cutting up the presentations and stuff a little bit more, but just that general idea of reflect, receive, and review, I think is going to be helpful going forward.
That's really great. That's a great framework, and that I think we're going to talk to Dave and Shane in a couple of weeks here about this. That starting a meeting or a training well, and that whole reflect and receive thing. It was so funny. Like I was talking to Erin, our staff lead, recently, and she was talking about how even she volunteered in the Kids Men recently, and she said she tried that, and she's known this. She's done this for a long time. But when you can positively prime them to talk, before you talk, so turn to each other and talk about something. Or she had them like throw out, what happened this week where Jesus showed up in your life or whatever. And then when somebody would shout something out, hey, I won my soccer game or something, then she would throw it back out to the kids and go, did anybody else have a sports thing this week? And they talked about that, and then somebody else said, this happened in school. Or whatever. Did anybody else have a school thing? And she said, here was the point. She's like, when we went to worship, their participation in worship was markedly different than when I just talked to them and said, now we're going to worship. And she was saying that priming of like the autobiographical priming, and it does something to engage the mind and heart in what we're about to do. In a way that just opens everybody up to what's coming, and so that's a huge learning. But I like the thing that you added at the end to the synthesis or the review. I think that's a good a good addition to that.
And I mean, I know this. You do not struggle with this. You're really good at this, but I struggle with. I default to no news is good news and efficiency, and so I love my team. I love people, but like I trust them. I want them to do, the whole thing. But what that does in my brain is I start to assume that everyone just gets it. Everyone's on board. Everyone's cool with this. Oh, everyone will love hearing all this information because they've been confused. Not necessarily. Right. So that her illustration is great. Like it just helps. Yeah, just like gather people around.
It readies them.
Yeah, exactly.
It readies them in a new way to receive the information.
Yeah, it needs to be a discipline for me. Yeah. So I need to do it all the time.
I love it.
Great. Okay, so I think we're done. Thanks for joining us again. I'm just so happy you're still with us. I just love it.
We'll see what the van conversation today does.
8 more pastors down the tubes. But if you do like the show, tell us by leaving a rating or review. And most importantly, share it with somebody that you know if you think it's helpful. The other thing you can share is dereksanford.com/reinventing church. That's where you can subscribe to his weekly newsletter, get all the latest free tools and posts and all these show notes and all the things. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.